All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for coming to a conversation on ADHD in tech. My name is Sarah, my pronouns are they, them, and I'm a success coach with LaunchCode. I do not have ADHD myself, but in working with our learners, I kept noticing it coming up in conversations, in the resource assessment on Slack. And so they were just, I thought it'd be nice to have a larger conversation within this community about how people are living with it, managing it, using it, how they're connecting with people about it. So that's why we're here today. And I have two wonderful volunteers, Ted and Jason, who are both TAs with LaunchCode. And so they're going to be speaking from their own experiences. I also wanted to acknowledge that we do not have someone who is assigned female at birth who's experiencing ADHD like on this current panel. I think that's something where I would like to pursue more like research and more knowledge. And just wanted to note that people who are assigned female at birth tend to be diagnosed with ADHD later in life, in like late 30s or 40s, and that often do not demonstrate the same symptoms as people who are assigned male at birth. And so that's kind of part of why, oh no, the cat's awake. That's kind of why there may be kind of less visible representation in some ways, kind of coming up through the academic environment. So I do want to invite Ted and Ryan, sorry, not Ryan, Ted and Jason to introduce themselves, and please give us a little tidbit of how you got into coding.
Okay, I don't know if you guys want me to go first, but I guess I will go first. Good evening, launch coders. Thank you for allowing me this time to speak with you. Currently, I am a Scrum Master with Boeing through a launch code apprenticeship. And how I got into coding was I was always a technical mind, and I will, basically when it comes to like gadgets, peripherals, even PCs, fixing PCs. And so tech was just kind of like natural for me. And it wasn't until I was working as a business analyst or a product owner for Centene Corporation's IVR team that I start getting the itch for the tech side, because I would design the IVR call flows, but I wanted to actually build them myself. And that made me want to look into the tech side of everything. So especially when one day engineer was sharing his screen, and I was actually understanding what was going on his screen. So fast forward, ran into a friend of mine, a good buddy of mine who graduated from LaunchCode, introduced me to LaunchCode, got into coding, found out that there's a major world in the coding world that I had never discovered before. So that is really how I got into coding, and haven't looked back since.
Thank you, Jason.
You're
We're
welcome.
glad to have you in the world. Yeah, Ted, over to you.
Hey, yeah, Jason, I'm glad you mentioned that. I had the same sort of experience with just like looking at code and wanting to like understand it. I was just like, what is this strange alien language? I must understand how it works. I was looking at a game engine. I got into it because I picked up RPG Maker, and I was like, I want to design games. I love video games because ADHD. And I realized after about like an hour of messing around with it that I'm never going to be able to do any of the stuff that I really want to do without learning coding, because it was built as like a, just play with the blocks and make a game with the simple interface. That doesn't work. If you want to do anything cool, you got to be able to code. So I, just on a whim learned to code. I was like, okay, sure, let's do it. And I figured like getting into it at the time would take like a year before I could, figure out how to declare a variable. So I was really surprised that like everyone in this, program has learned, you can pick stuff up pretty quickly. You can get some sort of functional level of coding really quickly. So I was kind of just addicted to it. And yeah, I mean, that was really my intro to coding. I know a lot of other people have kind of gotten in there through the video game route. So that's something I think is pretty cool. Yeah, that's it.
Awesome.
Honestly, I think one of the prerequisites to being in LaunchCode is you must be a gamer, right?
You're pretty much right there.
Right.
All right. Oh, and I also want to mention to our panelists, I've provided you with a list of questions. I may start asking you some questions, but you're also welcome to jump around on that and discuss things. Or if you think of something outside of what is on that list, like feel free to speak about that.
Sounds
Um,
great to me.
Yay. So my next question is more related to ADHD. So I was wondering like what kind of ADHD you have and how it presents.
So to give you a backstory, real quick, hopefully I don't bore all of you to death. so I when I was going through LaunchCode, one of the things that helped me out in LaunchCode was that it kind of exposed me to me. So when it comes down to going over the material, I found myself having a struggle with it, retaining knowledge because like say for example, I would read something and you can read an entire chapter or you can even read an entire page. And then I come to find out that I for some reason this information isn't soaking in. What did I just read? Like my eyes are glazing over, my eyes are reading it, but my mind is not receiving it. So it's like a disconnection. So uh, I noticed this since, I was very young and I didn't think anything of it. So, but because of the material and because of the length of time or, the shortness of time to even go over this material and retain it, I found it a huge struggle. So because I found it a struggle, I just finally said, forget it. I may sound crazy. I may sound, it may be nothing. I may be like, oh, well, if you just, get more sleep, I'm thinking that, you hear a doctor say something like that. But I talked to my doctor, my primary care physician, and my primary care physician says, well, you sound like you actually have ADD. And he said, but I can't diagnose it. I'd have to send you to a specialist. So the specialist he sent me to was a psychologist. And a psychologist gave me a questionnaire. And with that questionnaire, I, filled it out to the best of my knowledge, especially going back. And the questionnaire went all the way back to my childhood. And from there, after I've, filled it out, then of course, you have an interview with the psychologist, one of those get to know you kind of situations. And even the psychologist wanted to speak to my wife, and my wife turned into a snitch, but I like it. It's cool. She helped me out a lot, tattling on me. No, I'm just kidding. But from there, fast forward a couple weeks, I had a follow-up appointment, and this was an appointment to go over the results. And that's when the psychologist had officially diagnosed me with ADHD. And she stated that there were two types of ADHD. There were two classifications of ADHD. There's the hyperactivity and there's the inattentive. So she said that I had the inattentive classification. And she believes that based on the responses that I gave to her on the questionnaire, that I suffer from ADHD inattentive classification since I was a kid. It just went unchecked for so long because the hyperactivity wasn't there. So it's easy to catch the hyperactivity, but not easy to catch the inattentive, especially if you don't say anything. And it it was really a relief to know that, hey, something was wrong, and that I can be helped. Um, One thing that I always try to encourage people, like, sometimes people don't know you're suffering in silence, and the best thing to do is to speak out, go out and just say it. It doesn't matter how embarrassing it sounds. Doesn't matter, what it looks like in your head. Sometimes you'd be amazed of how how brave you really are just for speaking up. And I was ashamed about it for a minute, because it was like, man, is something wrong with me? You're kind of embarrassed about it a little bit. But when I see like how much support I've gotten just from this, and I'm not, looking for, to, oh, woe is me, or, trying to get the sympathy card. I'm not. But it was one of those situations where I didn't realize how much support I can get or how much support I would get, just for saying, hey, I need this help, or hey, this is what I'm struggling with. Um, it's helped out my coding a lot because again, you have to, there's certain aspects that you have to pay attention to, and you definitely need that. Um, yes, I was prescribed medication. I have to take Adderall daily. And the one thing about Adderall, which is something I did not know, is that it has a street value, but I'm not trying to sell it. So, but also on the flip side too, from what I understand, that ADHD, uh, especially the inattentive classification, can cause depression. So I had been suffering for severe depression and not realizing why I was suffering in it, or even that I was suffering it for quite some time. Because with inattentive, you really get frustrated with yourself and you get to internalize things. And so when you do that, everything, it's like you're you're a bottle and you keep filling up and filling up and filling up, and there's nowhere for the liquid to go anymore. And then eventually the bottle explodes. And that's exactly what it felt like for so long. Like you would get angry, So it was so great to know that there was a root cause to, it seemed like, a lot of my problems. And once I, first of all, acknowledged that I had the problem and accepted that I had the problem, then the point is not focusing on the problem itself or focusing on staying within the problem. The focus turned to, okay, let's get some help for the problem. So once I got the help for the problem, then things really started looking up. I was able to focus a whole lot more. I still struggle a little bit with focusing, but it's okay. I was able to focus a little bit more. My wife has noticed that my attitudes have changed. I'm more positive. I have more of a positive outlook, and it's not because of medication. It's because now you understand what the problem is, and so you try to adjust for that. And you try to understand that, hey, uh, you were suffering for so long, but you didn't want to tell anyone. You suffered for so long, but you didn't get the help. But now that you know that the help is there, hey, you start having more of a positive aspect and a positive look on it. Things like, I don't know how far you are in the LaunchCode project or the LaunchCode class, but things like a green check mark feels like a major accomplishment, right? Right? How many of us have actually felt that green check mark happiness? It's like better than a drug or alcohol or whatever you're right. So my thing is, things you start, one thing that you learn that you can kind of take away from this is that in spite of this so-called disability, you start learning to appreciate even the small victories. A green check mark may not seem like a lot for some people, but a green check mark was a major victory in my head because it was a struggle just to hold on to things. It was a struggle to hold on to information. And so now I get this green check mark, I can celebrate. And it got to a point where I get this green check mark. And even on my final assignment in Unit 2, I got the green check mark 3 weeks prior to the assignment due date. So you learn to, one thing I can say is this, is I don't like to look at the ADHD as really a disability because all it did was make me stronger. What it did, even though it is considered a disability, it still made me stronger. It made me not feel sorry for myself. It made me pick up and say, hey, I'm going to conquer this. I'm going to beat this. I'm going to do whatever I can to overcome this. And if you have that attitude, if you continue, building yourself up, even if you didn't have a support system around you, if you understand that if you have your own back and you're going to do whatever you can to fight and fight and fight, then guess what? You're going to win every single time. You're going to win. It's when you accept the defeat is when you've already lost. Don't accept the defeat. Keep going, keep pushing, no matter what. Don't let the disability disable you. Let your disability turn into an ability and help you to overcome and overdo and outdo those. It's amazing. And I'm sorry if I'm taking up a lot of time, but I wanted to say this. Today, I received a very interesting call. I received a call from a recruiter that heard about me through LaunchCode and wants to hire me, right? Not because of my disability, because of my persistence, because of my drive, because I wouldn't let something hold me back. Even if it were in my mind, even if it were in my body, I didn't let it hold me back. And I kept going on and I kept persevering. I kept being persistent. And when you do that, you show not only yourself something, but you show all those peers, everyone around you something. You show them that, guess what? Nothing can hold me down. Nothing can stop me. I'm unstoppable and I'm going to beat this because of the biggest enemy you have sometimes is the enemy within yourself. And if you can beat that enemy, you can beat anything. I'm sorry again for taking up a lot of time, but I just wanted to say some words to encourage some people.
Yeah, let's see some emojis and reactions and claps for Jason. We really appreciate you. Yeah. I just so many things you said there. I love, and I feel like mentioning the importance of like reaching out and finding that community and like realizing how supportive that community is. And also what you were saying about disability as reminded me of something someone once told me. They were like, disability is a social construct because it's not that you're disabled, it's that the world and society around you is disabling you. So it's like,
Right.
how do we as a group and as like a team, like work to make things more accessible, to really like bring out and appreciate that persistence in you, like having just so much to offer. So thank you for that. It's really great to hear.
No
Um,
problem.
yeah, and Ted, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Approach this question as you would like.
First, thanks for taking a while, Jason, because I needed that time. If y'all want to know what, like, well, here's the notes I took in the first 3 minutes of this meeting. Okay, that's ADHD. This is me just getting my act together in 3 minutes. Trying to like organize everything. One thing I'll tell you about ADHD is that you have allegedly a reduced working memory, which means less available information. That's not true. You just have this. It's less organized. You have the same number of units of information in your brain. It's just not the sequence that you're supposed to. It's not A, B, C, D, E. It's A, Q, triangle, alien face, and so that tends to kind of build itself up into a larger sort of personality of creativity, of a lot of just different associations. Yeah. Just a lot of fun chaos, good chaos, sometimes bad chaos. But yeah, so I appreciate you giving me a little buffer there. I'm literally always just hanging on by the seat of my pants. That is ADHD to me. So basically I got diagnosed when I was like 19, and that was back then when it was like in the 90s when it was like all the Newsweek and Time were like overdiagnosis, ADHD isn't real and all that stuff. So I bought into that and I was like, oh, it's just not a real thing. They just give you street drugs for it, and I guess those might be fun, but whatever. Yeah, that was the norm. So I didn't believe in it for a long time. That kind of did a lot of damage to me. Journalists suck sometimes. They don't know what they're talking about a lot of the time, especially in politics. So that was my experience. I didn't really believe it for a long time, and then finally I did take medication for a while, and I noticed that like, okay, it would help me do stuff. I could read books for hours and hours, but at the same time I still didn't really direct me in the most productive ways, because I didn't really, medication's not enough. You have to learn to manage it with behavioral stuff as well, and I didn't take that seriously. So that was what diagnosis looked like for me. And let me see, I guess to my sort of symptoms, treatment and management, is that basically I would say that ADHD is really just what I've found that other people kind of relate to when I talk about it, is that the permanent responsible person grown-up stuff just is never quite permanent. You just never quite get those habits in ways that stick forever that other people have. You know, you can have those days where you're like, feel like a kid wearing his dad's shoes and then successfully, you know, pulling everything off. And you're like, yeah, I got up at this time and I did this and then I did this and I followed the plan. And that's like 1 out of like 30 days. You know, otherwise it's, yeah, exactly right. Dopamine seeking for life. See, yeah, responsibility is always just balanced on a knife's edge. It's never permanent. You know, you are always struggling. It's very Sisyphean. You're always struggling to get back up that hill to where you feel most people just normally are. And to an extent, that's just imposter syndrome in your brain. Nobody's perfect. Nobody's quite as ordinary and responsible as you imagine, but it's worse for us. It's definitely worse for us. So I guess, I don't know. Yeah, Sarah, you mentioned also about like how symptoms look different for women. And that's, you know, that's really important to know. I mean, that's true with most stuff that you see. Usually it's, you know, that men tend to externalize more, so they get noticed more, which is to say men have more alloplastic adaptations, which is to say men are more likely to be jerks. So the symptoms get noticed. You know, with women tends to be like depression and other stuff like that. So I've known so many women who don't realize that they had ADHD and that they're, you know, they feel like there's something wrong with them, you know, something not medically wrong, whatever. And then they figure it out. Oh, cool. Yeah, good article. And yeah, so that's really important to know, especially because we're in Women Plus here, is that, you know, if you relate to some of these symptoms, but maybe not some of the more like impulsive, hyperactive stuff, then yeah, especially inattentive things like that, and just sort of a difficulty getting focused, then yeah, those can be symptoms of ADHD. But of course, it's kind of a spectrum, just, you know, like autism or whatever, where you can be here, you can be here, you can be just off the spectrum and not quite diagnosable, but still almost there. So, you know, most people can benefit from some sort of life management techniques. I guess, I don't know, what am I answering here? Diagnosed and treatment or management. So as far as treatment and management, let's see. I would say I've been very slowly just learning my entire life, just kind of, you know, that the ADHD is real, that there are different ways to management. And I don't really believe in like, you know, revelation and sudden massive changes that just, you know, like New Year's resolution type changes. I just kind of pick healthier habits up a little bit at a time, you know. Some people say, like, I picked up one of my favorite resources, How to ADHD on YouTube. I'll link that later. But, you know, she said one of her psychiatrists told her that you're only capable of like 1% change per day or whatever. That's that humans just don't do grand sweeping changes. You just have to pick stuff up a little bit at a time. And so that's how it's always kind of worked for me, is that like, yeah, exactly. Avoiding perfectionism. That's another huge thing with ADHD. And so just, you know, if you want to eat healthier, see if you like cooked whitefish, and then maybe you'll make it once a month, and then maybe once a week. You know, maybe you'll pair it with a side of broccoli, and a couple years later you eat healthier, just because those are habits that develop. And it's the same with ADHD. You know, you just kind of learn, for one, that like lists are very useful. You know, like exactly like Jason said, those green check marks, seeing those are just like visual dopamine bursts for you. Is just the task done. You know what I mean? It's that's what your brain wants. It's almost like it's like video game levels of satisfaction. And lists do that for you. They work for everybody, but for ADHD, they're really great. Particularly because they help you organize all that chaos that you cannot organize. Because that whole executive dysfunction is a big part of ADHD, and the executive dysfunction component that's so overwhelming for us is not knowing is not being able to manage the 25 different things that you have to do, you know, fix the sink, you know, pay this bill, do something for work, do research for something else for this. And, you know, being able to prioritize all those things and knowing how difficult they are is just much more stressful when you have ADHD. Being able to remember all the different things and being able to even just start thinking about them is difficult. It's painful for me to think about, oh God, what do I have to do to pay this bill? I know I'm going to try to log in and it's going to say I did wrong username and password, and I'm going to put in every possible combination of usernames and passwords I've ever used. And they're not going to work. And then I have to talk to this person. And then I'm going to, and that's where I am as soon as I start thinking about doing even the simplest thing, is that down this whole line of I got 48 things to do and none of them are going to work. And it's just a black hole I'm jumping into. And everything feels like that, all of the 25 things on my list. So when I can at least see what's in front of me on a list and sometimes maybe list the sub steps for that and think of those as complete, that helps tremendously, which I guess leads to just a couple other things I want to wrap up too. Jason, I see the temptation to talk infinitely. That's just how I roll though. Yeah, so basically for kind of those little sub things, probably my best trick has been just tricking myself into doing the absolute minimum for any possible task. One of my friends called it the 60th of an inch rule. It's basically you just find the tiniest possible slice of effort you can to start anything, and that just tricks your brain into getting going. You just go, all right, I'm just going to roll 1 inch down this hill, and then all of a sudden you just roll all the way down the hill. And a lot of that just comes down to even recognizing what is a challenge for me. Like if I know I might have some stuff hanging over my head, things that I needed to take care of a while ago that's about to build into a big consequence, and I know there's about to be something about it in my email, I'm scared to open my email. So I'll say the 1/60th of an inch there is like just pop open Gmail, scroll, or even pop open Gmail, scroll down, see if there's anything there. And don't read any emails, don't even think any further than that, just see if there's anything there. That is the tiniest slice of activity that I can take to get that rolling, and then it's in my head. And then you have the second thing I want to talk about, very important, is the Zeigarnik effect, which is basically that when you start a task, it loads itself up into your sort of temporary working memory for the next day or whatever. When you just start writing an essay, write the first paragraph, it's going to be in the background of your thoughts, in the background of your head. It's going to be sort of things will just naturally associate with it. You see a building, it looks like this, it might make you think about something that you could write about in the essay. It's just, you've got sort of a back burner of information in your brain that's willing to meld with, whatever else is happening, incoming ideas or sensations or whatever. So when you start a task, you just kind of, you're portioning a little bit of your focus towards that. So that, and then because of that, you tend to be more likely to complete it. So if you want to get a task done, you just start it a little tiny bit, and then it sort of takes on a life of its own. And other than that, I have what I call super days, which is just where I sort of feel invincible. I start that, I get that first green check mark in the morning and just go. And then all of a sudden, all these things that were like, I thought were going to take 6 weeks to get done and be impossible, they're just all gone. They're just wiped out. I was just I had a power star that day, and I just just right through everything, just, blew a whole list apart. Now it's impossible to have those every day. You wish you could, but it just isn't possible. But that's really useful for getting stuff done. And I guess that's about it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm writing down things that I want to just share, with the classes, which, definitely 1/60th of an inch. And what was the name of the effect that you mentioned?
Zeigarnik, Zeigarnik.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. And then Jason, did you want to add anything about kind of tips and tricks and tools that you found your own self using? I don't know why I said your own self.
That's fine. That's okay. First of all, Tom, that is brilliant, my man. I actually learned just a lot from you in the past 2 minutes. Then you're phenomenal, my man. Really, you are. One thing also I wanted to say this. So, I heard when you said that you were 19 years old when you got diagnosed, and a lot of people don't realize this. For some reason, some people think I'm younger than I really am. I'm in my 40s.
Me too.
Right. So I was diagnosed with this in my 40s. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is this is not too late for you all. Anyone that, feels, that, oh my gosh, this is a young person's issue, or this is, trust me, it's not. Just, get the help you can get. But one of the things because my memory is shot. Like, it's amazing how I can remember some of the things that I do remember. It's crazy though, but I can remember numbers very well, but I can't remember names half of the time, and so one of the things that I try to do is associate, certain things, to try to remember, like, have you ever walked into a room and forgot why you walked into that room? or you leave the house and you forget something. I come to find out that that's actually a symptom of my ADHD. So, one of the things I try to do is try to remember, try to train my brain to remember certain things, remember certain details, to pay attention to some details, try to, uh, you know, remember things. And I've gotten to a point where now I really start taking notes. So when I tell you taking notes, hey, I'm with you on that, my man. You have to take those notes sometimes, and it may, like I said, it may seem like an inconvenience now, but the smallest inconvenience can save you a bigger inconvenience later. And that's really one of the things you have to look at it. You have to take the lesser of two evils, yeah, is it convenient now? Yeah, it might be, but you know what? The 30 seconds it takes for you to write something down could probably save you about 15 minutes later. You know, how many of us had probably gotten maybe 10 miles away from your house and realized you left something there and you have to turn around and go get it. So yeah, that feeling sucks. I'm not gonna lie, it sucks. But you know, again, the best thing to do is to just remain positive. Just take your wins. No matter how small they may seem, take them and make them big. Celebrate your wins. No matter how small they are, celebrate them. Because what before you received the help, you probably focused on all the negative and you didn't realize how blessed you really are, how great your life really is. I say that because, just to give you a little, it's a little embarrassing to say, but I'll say it. At one point, I was suicidal because I was so depressed about, how my thinking was. I would get angry with myself for forgetting things, the simplest things. I would get angry with myself because I couldn't understand why. Uh, I suffered so much just reading a page. I could not understand. And you start internalizing that, and then you start focusing on all the bad and everything about yourself. And you get to a point where you start feeling like you hate yourself. And that's where you don't want to go. That's a dark world. And what you want to do is you want to start taking your wins. So going back to the example that I gave, earlier, which was, again, when GitHub gives you that green check mark and you're happy you know, as sunshine and rainbows and everything like that, that was a small win for someone else, but that was a major win for me because I may have been working on that code for 2, 3 weeks, trying to figure it out, trying to, you know, look through all the videos, read through all the material, and trying to retain it. And then when I get that green check mark, it's like a big trophy, and not just the participation trophy you got at Little League Soccer. No, it was like the Grand Prix trophy, right? Because that was a win for me because of the struggle that I had to go through just to get through that. So one of the things that when it comes to like resources, what I always say is this: like right now, I'm not sure what everyone's diagnosis is, or even if you have been diagnosed, or maybe you're just here because you wanted to get insight and learn, which is no problem to do. But for those that are suffering from this, I invite you to stay connected to each other, even to me. If you want to reach out to me, definitely can find me on LinkedIn. You definitely can find me on Facebook. You know, if you want to reach out just to talk it out, know that you're not suffering alone. Because when you think you're alone, that's when your thoughts get real dark. But when you have a support system, people, especially those that understand what you're going through, it helps out a lot. That's one of the reasons why like AA meetings are so successful, because with AA meetings or meetings like NA or AA, those people are people that have lived in your shoes before. those are people that, you know, you're surrounded by your peers that are basically considered equal, right? I never look at someone as less than I am. If anything, I'm always looking at people, some people like better than me, and they probably look at me the same way. And that's, you know, but I always like to say, hey, you know, whatever I can do to help you out, I'm going to do that. So if you want to, reach out to me, talk, you know, just to talk. Just if you want to get words of encouragement, I'll give you words of encouragement. I'll do what I got to do because I want to see you successful, not only in this program, but even outside of this program. But if we have to work together to defeat the demon that keeps trying to bother you, then doggone it, that's exactly what we're going to do.
I love that, Jason. Thank you for that very generous, like heartfelt offer. And yeah, I also saw someone asked in the comments, are there any communities you found for ADHD that you could share? I'm seeing that Ted has shared a link in the chat related to that. And I do want to say, like, I will be sending out my notes for each class that I've advertised this to. So I'm hoping we can just kind of keep this available to people. And then if you did want to share your LinkedIn, you're welcome to do so in the chat as well.
Absolutely.
But also no pressure, I know.
No, I'm actually going to share mine right now. I'm grabbing
Yeah.
that for you guys right now. So that way you have that.
And Ted, did you want to talk about this speaker? I think you mentioned them before.
Yeah, I just unmuted myself after being unmuted for the entire time Jason was talking. So oops. Anyway, yeah, ADHD. Well, I guess I just wanted to kind of link that. Because yeah, I know we're gonna do resources, and yeah, I don't even know if I went off on treatment and stuff unnecessarily last time. I was just kind of answering the questions. We had a document about this, so I was going like, okay, 2A and B. Yeah, I hope I didn't just rant for 10 minutes off topic. But anyway, yes, I do want to link that Quora community was pretty cool. It's always great to get on the ground information, like from people instead of like just psychiatric articles, because you know researchers can be disconnected sometimes, and they're oftentimes behind the curve on. They're kind of like politicians sometimes, where they end up following their constituents rather than leading them. You know, finding out what's safe by seeing what people are actually doing and reporting, and then following up on that. So sometimes just being in touch with the community can tell you where research is going. It can tell you what is going to be the next official line about ADHD, and you'll start to see, you know, stuff goes both ways. It goes, you know, top down academia to people, but there's also, especially these days with the internet, it's very bidirectional. You'll see communities of people that kind of pick up on things before researchers do, because there's thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people, and it's impossible eventually not to notice the common threads. You know, whereas a psychiatrist might only treat a few hundred people with a particular disorder. And you know, then thousands of people with different disorders and not really focus on any particular thing. So yeah, and I guess I'm sorry. What was the topic here, Sarah?
Yeah, I think you shared how to ADHD,
Oh,
the YouTube
right.
channel. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I actually really want to talk too much about that, other than that was she was really useful, just for kind of that was watching her videos was when I first went, oh my God, ADHD is definitely very real, and that's 100% me. That was when I first had my like real, all right, I got to do something about this moment. And when I started picking up on strategies and stuff, and just finding it relatable. So it's again another huge benefit of talking to real people instead of academic words, you know, or like one psychiatrist here or there who might not even really relate to your condition. You know, that I guess that was really about all I had to say about that, other than that, you know, she's got great videos about stuff. I think the one the one I linked was not. My personal most useful one was she had about cooking for ADHD. It was just like easy recipes, stuff that does not require a lot of spoons, as they'll call it, which is to say executive control, you know, glucose consumption in the brain, or maybe limited usage of dopamine. So basically, yeah, it just kind of easy stuff to cook. And she just has all kinds of really cool tips like that. But yeah, and then, well, I guess really the video I linked it related a lot to what Jason said about you know, kind of looking at small wins as really big wins, because you know everyone's got their strengths and weaknesses, and that was kind of one of the biggest realizations I had to come to is not to look at myself as somebody who's just wildly behind in life in all dimensions. And if I can, manage to get through a 6-hour workday without running through the window, then, that I have to look at things that are difficult for me as my genuine big challenges, and note that there's some things that are easier for me. And so kind of the video I linked there it's called "Why Do We Hold Ourselves to Neurotypical Standards?" And it's just about that, and I found it to be a really just important, powerful video. And yeah, I mean, I appreciate that you said that, Jason, because that's just a lesson you have to learn over and over again, almost anew every time, that like, okay, just managing to get this bill in the mail on time is for me actually pretty good, because we ADHD types tend to do things sort of all or nothing, in bulk or not at all. So when you have these little basic life maintenance things that are like a little bit every day, that's really hard, because we want to just wait for it all, sweep it up at the deadline, and then just, get the power star, go Superman, get it all done. And life doesn't really let you do that with a lot of things. So you really do kind of, and if you're just looking at it, it is, like, okay, I just barely managed to scrape by here. Today, I worked as hard as I possibly could and managed to do about as well as a 9-year-old child. That's not a very motivating thought. That's not a very self-sustaining system for getting things done. You just have to say, this was the hard thing for me, and I did it anyway. And then I also did some cool, weird stuff that most people don't do, I mean, it was, when I get bored, like, I mean, give me 2 days and I will like own a ukulele. That actually happened, and that's just part of ADHD, is just picking up new stuff, finding new things. We have our strengths as well. But we definitely have our weaknesses. And yeah, I don't know, I guess that's really all I have on topic there.
No, I just think that even the way that you both are communicating in this space is so helpful and validating to other people, to feel seen and to feel represented. So everything's on topic. And I wanted to also open things up for questions from others. I'm going to keep taking notes here, but I will stop the recording here.
And I realized my brain would fuzz over details and just how crazy I could get about stuff. I had a lot of like weird, big thinking that paid no attention to reality. And I had to start learning very consciously to start drilling in on details. I would always just look at it and go, oh, got it. Yeah, it's science, done. Right. There's air and chemicals. I got it. And then the test comes and it's like PZ times Q. And I'm like, wow, I forgot about all that stuff. So writing, I take a lot of notes about specific things. I'll sometimes ask somebody what their name is and instantaneously forget to pay attention, just immediately. What was the point of even asking that question? I don't know, because I forgot the purpose of asking someone the name is to then pay attention, remember. And I will always forget something. If I just happened to be the other day, I had to drill it into my head. Like I said, with ADHD, the whole point is it never goes away. It's not like you just get into a routine, responsible adult life and then the symptoms are gone. It's just, unless I specifically take an extra 5 minutes before I leave the house. If I need anything other than keys and wallet, it is as good as forgotten, just the other day, I managed to do that. I'm just like, I cannot leave suddenly. I cannot leave the house on a whim, because I will not remember what I need to. Okay. So as far as, great, lost it again. Help me.
Don't feel bad. Even I forgot the question.
Yeah, it's going to go all over the place.
Just like in communicating with a team or with a manager, like what are some things that you'd want someone to understand about working with you? And
I lucked out. I worked at my boss had ADHD as well, and that's how small companies get founded sometimes. So I didn't really have to do a whole lot. He was super understanding. And especially when you work in small tech companies, you'll notice that tech tends to be, it's what I call neurodivergent. A lot of ADHD, a lot of like autism, just a lot of neurodivergence. And that's kind of where nerds come from. So basically it's really, it's a friendly environment to that if you have the right boss. And I would say that my boss was just super understanding, so I lucked out in that way. But one of the good things about coding is that it kind of lends itself to bursts of intense focus for hard problems, and then YouTube. Like, you didn't hear this from me, but I heard that I read somewhere that like the average programmer spends about half their day working, and then almost as much just YouTube, random articles, just kind of not working and just relaxing the brain, because it depends on the kind of programming you do. If it's just really simple HTML, okay, then you can turn on music, have a TED talk in the background. I listened to probably 500 TED talks at my last job. For when you're doing simpler programming, that's a great way to stay stimulated. But basically, when you're doing harder stuff, you tend to concentrate really hard, and your brain just can't really do that all day long. It can't just run a marathon, and so you need that YouTube to decompress. So it's kind of, to an extent, built into the system. They're sort of used to it. A lot of bosses even like watch every single IP request you make, so they know what you're doing, and they're just used to it, and it's baked into the system. What they're really watching is like, how much work do you get done compared to other people. And so ADHD can lend itself to getting a lot of really challenging work done pretty quickly. But as far as communicating, I didn't have to do much. I remember one time when I was sitting down for like negotiations after a year there, my boss is awesome. I was just like, oh, I'll be good with like 40 grand a year. And he's like, come on, man, ask for more than that. You can get more than that. And I was just like, well, okay, one thing I really need is to kind of like organize my thoughts and relax a little bit and just sort of empty out my brain. Sometimes I need to just be able to walk around. I mean, ever since I was a teenager, I would just walk around for like an hour or 2 or 3 at night. And during the day, that's great too. So, and to just like, cool, you need to just sometimes just leave the office and walk around for 30 minutes or an hour or whatever. And he was okay with that. And yes, like Jason mentioned earlier, he was kind of being surprised at the resources that were available. I was kind of surprised. Oh, you can just ask for that, and all of a sudden you get like a 30-minute break. It's like an extra lunch, and all I had to do was say, "Can I please have that?" And explain that I find it helpful. And especially if you can say that it's ADHD behind this, that's probably another great way to ask. But beyond that, this is probably not really my question, because I had a very forgiving, awesome work environment in my own like real programming job. So I'll pass it over to Jason.
So one thing that I can tell you is this, is that again, especially with a lot of corporations right now, they are more friendly to people with disabilities, whatever the disability is. But one of the things that I can always say is this, is that whatever you consider, basically, it's like I told you earlier this evening, was don't let your disability disable you. Okay, what you want to do is you want to turn it into an ability. Sometimes you do have to press yourself a little harder than most, and that's fine. I looked at, for example, finally went through the chat comments, right? Okay, so I saw something, what you were saying, Carl. Use that to your advantage. Okay, so what you want to do is you want to um, what may seem bad to others, you can turn it around. You can flip it and make yourself marketable. You understand what I'm saying? Like, how can I put it? There is a reality show that I never watched, but I know about it. It's called it's something about Little People, Little People, Big World, or something like that. So some people may look at people who have dwarfism or something like that as a disability, but here it is. They turned it around and made it marketable. Well, that's what you want to do. You want to try your best to do something to make it look marketable for you. When you're in this world in coding and software development and software engineering, you're actually going to be spend a lot of time marketing yourself. That's why LinkedIn, places like LinkedIn, Indeed, are like great tools for software, junior software developers and other software developers, because it allows you to market yourself out there. So what I'm trying to say is, in spite of how you feel about yourself, understand that you still have value. even in the workplace, you still have a value, because if you didn't have a value, then you wouldn't exist. Well, right now you exist. You made it into LaunchCode. You made it through LaunchCode. So here's the situation. What you don't realize is it took a lot for you to even get into LaunchCode, right? You had to have a test. You had to take a test. And some people may have had to take this test multiple times before they finally got in. Well, guess what? That's an accomplishment. That said a lot about your persistence, is what we said earlier today about persistence. So instead of looking at this diagnosis, or this problem that you're suffering with, instead of looking at as a negative thing, use it to motivate you to punch through the wall. There might be a wall that got erected, while you were, looking down. But guess what? You can bulldoze through that wall. You can say, nothing's going to stop me. This is not going to stop me. This is not going to prevent me from succeeding. This is not going to prevent me from achieving my dreams. You have to start looking at, I am better than my problem. I am better than what's going on inside of me. I may have to work harder than most, or I may have to even work harder than some. But guess what? When it's all said and done, I'm going to be on top. I'm going to be the best that I can be. And I'm most likely going to be better than, some people that are around me. True story here. Working at I was like a business analyst, product owner with Centene Corporation for the IVR team, right? As I stated earlier, one thing that happened when I became a part of that IVR team in, I want to say 2018 or 19, when I became a part of that team, I was like a rookie, but it was amazing. Within 3 months, I started becoming the go-to guy. And fast forward a year, 18 months later, it's like I'm a de facto leader of my team, the team that I worked on. Everyone comes to me for advice, for you help them with help them with any projects that they're working on. They trust my knowledge. And not only does my team trust my knowledge, but so does the IT team that we partner up with. Even they trust my knowledge. They trusted me. Why? Because I went the extra mile. I used my disability not to gain sympathy, but I used it to motivate me. No one knew I was suffering with this on the job, but I used it to motivate me to be better. And because of that, people want to work with me. People admire me. People want to say, hey, I'd rather work with this guy. Already had a lot of people within LaunchCode and even outside LaunchCode that say, hey, I have a project. Can you partner with me? Work on this project with me. I ran into someone I knew at Wingstop a couple weeks ago. They were like, hey, I'm about to work on this project. I want you to work with me. So what I'm trying to say is this, is that the only person that can defeat you is you. And if you allow a disability to disable you, then you've already defeated yourself. Don't allow your disability to defeat you, especially in the workplace, because you just don't let your disability trick you into believing that you're slow or unintelligent. You're incredibly intelligent. You're not slow. It may take you a minute to understand what's going on, but the thing is, at least you understand, right? I would have to read something 4 or 5 times. I would have to read a page 4 or 5 times before it finally soaked in. It's not saying that I was stupid, not stupid. It's just, the disability was causing me not to retain the information. Well, guess what? 4 or 5 times may be inconvenient, but I'm still going to keep trying, still going to do it. And a lot of times, what the boss is hiring you to be able to figure out what the problem is, or they know that you're resourceful, right? They're not hiring you because you memorized everything and you know it like the back of your hand. No, they hired you because they're saying, okay, you're resourceful. You can actually get the answer if you get stuck. That's what they're paying for. They're not paying for you to memorize every code and every trick in the book. No, no. The most advanced coders even have to go to the resources. They even watch YouTube videos. They even Google. Just understand that your boss is not hiring you because you memorize something. Your boss is hiring you because you know how to find the answer that you're looking for. That's how you beat the system. You beat the system by you becoming better and knowing what they want. If you give them the end result and you give it to them in an efficient time, then guess what? You are winning. You're not allowing your disability to disable you. Use your disability to punch through the wall, to motivate you to say, you know what? Not today. I'm going to keep trying. I'm going to keep going on, keep going on. When I was going through LaunchCode, my TA told me, one of the things we love about you, not only are you charismatic, but you keep pressing and you keep pressing and you keep pressing. And then you become successful because you keep pressing. Didn't realize I had that drive until I came through LaunchCode. But use it to your advantage. Don't be defeated. Don't give up. Don't like throw in the towel. Is walking away for a brief second throwing in the towel? Absolutely not. Sometimes you have to walk away. Sometimes you have to say, let me take a break. You have to do that. But what you want to do is just never give up and never accept defeat because of a disability. Remember, this is something you cannot help. Okay? You can't help this. You can't help that something is not what some people consider normal. But what you can do is use it to your advantage and beat the odds and beat it. Because when you start beating it, you start getting a certain confidence that you didn't even realize you had. And guess what? You won. And when that confidence grows inside of you, it shows outside of you. And that's what they love. They love to see that confidence. They love to see that, hey, this person can do it. I want him on my team. I want her on my team. I want them on my team. That's what it's all about. That's what you have to do.
Thank you, Jason. We are at 6:30. It's been an hour. I always am like, oh, I wish we had more time because it's such a longer conversation than you can really fit into 1 hour. I think would people, and you can absolutely 100% say no, would you be okay with another 15 minutes for Q&A or?
I would be, you got me for like 3 hours if you want.
Don't say
I don't
that.
care.
That's the danger.
Well, if it helps anyone, then I'm willing to do it, especially in this program. So please, ask away, and I'm here until you all are exhausted of me or tired of hearing my boring voice.
So I did want to respond to a question in the chat that I really appreciated, and I also see your hand, Selena. And there are multiple questions in the chat, so I'm going to be trying to kind of work these in. So the question is, how do you work with your team or management to know what's a reasonable amount of time to complete in a given amount, or a reasonable amount of work to complete in a given amount of time? The person said, when I start a new job, I have a tendency to hyper-focus and overachieve and set an unsustainable work pace, which leads to being taken advantage of by management. So that's a really interesting question of like, when you do have those days of like really intense achievement, how can you make sure that that isn't then set as the expectation for like every single day? What does that conversation look like?
So as far as what I go, sometimes, yeah, I know exactly what it feels like to, do the overachieving and thing. But what I like to do is, I may complete a project in a very quick amount of time. So that gives you downtime. Well, the key is don't let them see you have downtime. So when you let them see you have downtime, then they're like, oh, we can give them more work. So no, sometimes you gotta take some time and say, okay, well, instead of well, I don't rush through my work because you don't want to do that. You can make mistakes. But there are times where you become such a pro at what you do that it doesn't take you long to do it and you make it seem seamless. Well, that's the time where you take to build yourself. Do some learning, do some training, do some refresher courses, whatever you have to do. So for example, here it is, I graduated LC 101 in November 2021, right? Okay, so I have software development certification, correct? Well, since then, I became double certified as a Scrum Master. I became certified through Scrum Alliance, and I became certified through SAFe. So I didn't stop learning, and I wouldn't stop learning. And that's one thing you have to do if you want filler time, because I'm the kind of person, I hate being bored. I cannot be bored. It's horrible me being bored. I got to do something. So learn something. If but don't show them you have downtime. Don't fiddle your thumbs. Believe it or not, you'd be amazed to know how many employers respect the fact that you're using your downtime to advance yourself or advance within the company or to pick up more skill to be more effective at your job. And they will allow that time. I've never once heard of especially in a major corporation, I've never heard one of them say, oh, you're wasting time learning. You know how stupid that sounds? That sounds stupid coming out of my mouth, right? Because that's ridiculous. Every employer wants you to grow. There are some that wants to see you grow personally, but there are many of them that want to see you grow professionally inside of their company. And so they're not going to stand in your way. Again, it goes back to what I said. Use that disability to be your ability. I became a scrum master. So guess what? I can put that under my belt. I became a software developer. Guess what? I could put that under my belt. I'm a product owner. Guess what? I can put that under my belt. So I have all these things that I learned while I was in downtime, and now I'm more marketable now, right? Use it to your advantage.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. I want to jump in quickly here. I do not have ADHD, as I mentioned. I do have bipolar, which means that sometimes I have like a hypomanic or a hypo kind of depressive episode, which is like higher energy, lower energy. So I will actually like speak with my manager and say like, hey, I've noticed like I have been very productive, but it's kind of at the cost of there's going to be a deficit in energy like in the next few weeks. So I just wanted to kind of let you know ahead of time. So if I'm like maybe adjusting my hours a little bit more in the afternoons to like sleep, that might be why. Or just like, thankfully at LaunchCode, like everyone is super understanding, but yeah, you can also have an open conversation with your manager if you've like been able to kind of establish that rapport. But I understand that it's very different depending on like what you're going through and like who your manager is. But Ted, do you have any thoughts on that? And then I want to jump to Selena for the question after that.
Well, I just have kind of a natural homeostasis with underachievement. I find that like if I work really hard and get a lot of stuff done, I just sort of naturally drift into, being lazy or not getting as much done. Like I said, the brain sort of regulates itself when you've done a huge sprint. You just kind of got to calm down for a little while. And sometimes that looks like just slowing down or not doing work or watching YouTube or whatever. But you can kind of regulate between the extremes by, like I said earlier, like watching videos or something, and like exactly what Jason said, like learning while you're doing other stuff. If you're doing kind of boring, easier coding or some other kind of work or whatever, I like to have stuff playing in the background. Like I know the whole time Jason was talking, I watched that video Sarah linked, and that's just, you know, that's like I said, ADHD. It's instead of sequential thinking, you can be scattered between multiple places and, you know, follow two conversations. And that's just normal to need that level of stimulation sometimes. So I learned a lot while I was working just by instead of putting all of my attention on coding and trying to get as much hard work done as possible, I would, you know, be learning about behavioral economics or AI or whatever. And some of that stuff can feed. It's not as anywhere near as practical as like learning how to become a scrum master, like Jason said. But you know, it can all still kind of feed back into just being a, you know, better employee, understanding things more. Because, you know, kind of one of the primary things with ADHD is almost like a learning addiction. You know, we like to, learning is novelty. Novelty is stimulation. So we love to learn. And yeah, and you can just kind of slow your work pace down by dedicating half your plate to like watching this, you know, listening to this TED talk while you're also just, you know, pounding out a little bit of boring HTML. So yeah, you can sort of set your work pace and adjust expectations accordingly. Like basically though, you know, your bosses will learn how much you're capable of doing by how much you do. And also the issue of regulating your pace when you're programming is an enormous one. Everyone suffers from that. I mean, one of the best programmers I knew, a guy who was like, you know, like had done it for 50 years or whatever. He's like, you know, basically if you want to figure out how long it's going to take you to do something, to code something, first, take your initial estimate and multiply it by 4, and then multiply that by 4. So yeah, it's about 16 times longer than you would initially think. Because it's just, programming is all about having seen these big picture. Oh, you just do this and this and this. And then as you get into it, it's like getting lost in a forest, and it's just more and more details and more little things and little tripwires and all that. So, you know, no boss is really good at estimating how long it's going to take to do this or that, unless it's an extremely streamlined task that they're familiar with. So you have a lot of fuzzy area there, I would say, in most cases. That's it.
Thank you. Selena, I know you've had your hand raised. I'm also seeing notes in the chat and writing them down, so thank you.
Hey, yeah. Sorry, I joined late. I joined like half an hour in to the call, so I missed the first part. But I wanted to join because I'm actually currently kind of in the process of like figuring out my ADHD. I've been talking to a therapist for like the last year, and then like most recently, since transitioning into a software developer position and working from home, I've noticed like, you know, like probably some like kind of symptoms that you've probably discussed already. So I've been like talking about that, and he was just saying like, hey, this like actually kind of shows like some you know, some like ADHD tendencies. So I just wanted to share and just kind of say, and I'm saying to myself too, like it is okay. And I actually I felt like a lot of like embarrassment and like a lot of shame for a while that I wasn't actually doing any, well, not like productive work at home. I'd be like so distracted. I work from home for a small company, and like Tom said, similar to Tom, my manager was actually pretty laid back when basically I told him, hey, I've not been as productive as I, you know, was hoping to be. I get so distracted. Like, you know, I like, you know, told him that like I may have ADHD and that I'm kind of working on that, like behind the scenes. So like just FYI, like I can check in more about that. But similar, I think Jason mentioned that he works for Centene. I did a actually, I guess a little bit, I'm wary of time, so I'll just like fast forward through. But I did I moved to the US and I changed my career to and did the LaunchCode LC 101 in 2020, September 2020, and then I did Liftoff, and I started an apprenticeship in end of 2021, so last year. I started with Centene, and the way the Centene, they have like the agile sprint. So like basically we have a check-in every morning about like what you did yesterday and like what you're doing today and whether you have any blockers. And that was like very high, like fast paced for me. And I was just like, oh, like, and I would get so much anxiety if I wasn't doing enough in my mind, like enough work for like to report like the next morning, or like, you know. And there was a lot of imposter syndrome too. Like I had no idea what I was supposed to be doing as a business systems analyst. I never even heard of the role until like I took the job. So like there was a lot of like pressure I was putting on myself. So I did that, and I was also lucky to make connections. And that was again, like that wasn't software development, that was like the business systems analyst side of things, which used a little bit of development. But I think I still wanted to try out software develop as a software developer. So I made connections, and basically I was like doing the apprenticeship and in like a part-time internship like at the beginning of this year from like January to like March. So I was like kind of overworking myself a little bit, but like it kind of kept me busy. And then because they couldn't offer me a job like off the bat, but after 3 months of like interning, they were like, okay, here's a full-time position. So that's who I'm working for now. So I like stopped the apprenticeship in March and like transitioned to a software developer position. And the difference between that is it's not an agile like agile kind of environment. It's kind of the complete opposite. So going from that to like, oh, here's, a few bugs to work on. So they've given me 2 bugs, and I've been working, and I've seen like how quickly the other developers have been working through them, and we meet like once a month. We've changed that actually now to we meet once a week, but we changed that now to once a month because we're kind of like slow working. So but I've been on the same 2 bugs, and it's like I feel embarrassed to say this, but for maybe like a month and a half now, and like I kind of make very little progress, and like it was really hard to be like, hey, I haven't actually committed anything yet. I'm still working on it. I'm still like figuring it out. But it's like so encouraging to hear, that's fine. You're new to the system, like all of this code, you're still trying to get your head around, and it's completely fine. And I think getting it off my chest, like kind of helped me motivate myself to be like, okay, yeah, I can carry on doing this now. I'm not like just kind of hiding this thing. But now I have to like figure out how to kick myself into gear. But I'm seeing some of these resources, and I'm definitely going to look into some of these, which is really helpful. In the meantime, I reached out to I don't know if anyone's heard of executive function coaches. I reached out to one, so I'm gonna like kind of start seeing someone in a month's time, which hopefully will be helpful, but it kind of gives me a little bit of hope. And I spoke to a psychologist friend today, and which was really nice as well. And she gave me like some like a promo code for a meditation app. And I went for my first run today, which was kind of nice. Well, actually, it was actually horrible, but like nice that I did it. But yeah, so that's why this is the look I'm going with right now. But I'm like, I feel like I'm at that transition stage right now, like very recent, very like kind of new. I know that like some people might have known that they had ADHD from like a kid, but like I'm like at the stage where I'm looking back and I'm like, oh yeah, I've had ADHD like literally all my life, but I've just figured it out workarounds and somehow have like survived this long through school. Actually talking through my like LC 101 experience, sorry, I'll promise I'll wrap up. LC 101 experience, I really struggled because I've always struggled with education and getting like things on time and like working, because I'm partially like a perfectionist and like really want to learn something really, really well, that I really struggle with with actually learning anything at all, because I'm just like so stuck on how should I learn this, how should I process information, like how should I organize my notes, how should I do this, that I don't actually get the job done. So I really struggled with that. Then I also had COVID, so then I was behind, and then I literally spent 2 weeks doing like assignment 3 to 6 during the Christmas week because I got an extension, but I got it done. And then I went on to unit 2, and again struggled through unit 2, but like it was easier, but I struggled just because of myself. But I kind of made it through each stage. Each part was a challenge, but I just want to use myself as an example that you can do it. And I really thought I couldn't actually get it. I didn't think I would be able to get a job, because I was just like, I really struggled through this course, but I did, and like I'm doing fine, I think. But yeah, I'm happy for anyone to like reach out. I don't have the answers or anything, but I can just share my experience and give you updates, I guess, from where I'm at. Yeah. but yeah, I just wanted to share that. I don't know if that was helpful
So
or not.
helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm so glad you joined the
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah. Sorry, I also ramble because I get like
No.
lost in
Oh my God.
thoughts.
Every person has apologized
Yeah.
for rambling, and that's this whole part is talking about
Yeah.
what you're going through.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I actually had a follow-up question. You kind of
Mhm.
mentioned like you know, symptoms or kind of signs, and I was wondering like what
Mhm.
were some of the presenting things that made you think, oh, maybe I do have ADHD, maybe I should explore this.
Great. So I think the first things were like I can't get myself to and like the more I've talked about it with my therapist, the more like he's kind of like pointed out like what that links to in terms of executive functions. But it was I was finding that I would get myself organized. I'll get my desk, I got my whole office space, I got it nice, I got like the ergonomic keyboard, I got like, you know, all this stuff. And then it was the next thing I was like, oh, I'm gonna do a standing desk too. So I got like a little stand for my desk and I got a to like raise my laptop, and then I got like a little floor pad thing to like, you know, for ergonomics and things. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do this. And then once I get everything set up, I would walk away and like, oh, I'm just gonna go make a cup of tea, or I'm gonna go and you know, check on the chickens, or like I'm gonna walk my dog now. And like there was always something before I actually get started with my work. So I was talking to my therapist and he was just like, hey, so it sounds like, you know, ADHD. So like tell me like these three things. I wrote notes for this, so I'm just gonna see if I can it's a prioritizing in initiating and transitioning. So they're the three things that you mentioned that were I gave like examples of each thing. So like for example, I think like I think this is all stuff most people know already, maybe. So like I'm new to it. So okay, I'm new to it. So I don't want to like, you know, explain things to people who already know about ADHD. But I'm learning about it right now. Prioritizing in terms of, for example, like if I've got like emptying the dishwasher and making the bed and like starting the laundry to do, like there's no urgency in any of those tasks in my head. So like I don't know which one to start first. Like I just get stuck. I just like I'm like, okay, I've got those things to do. And then I just like get stuck. I don't know, like I freeze, you know, I don't do it. But I know I've got to do it. What was the other thing? Initiating, so starting the actual thing. So once I've actually said, okay, I'm gonna empty the dishwasher, I will like, you know, similar to starting work, I would like go off and do something else and we're like, okay, I'll do that later, I'll do that later. It's fine. And then transitioning is like once I've completed the job, there's like more steps in between. I was talking to the psychologist friend earlier, and she like kind of filled in some other gaps that like I also struggle with that I didn't realize I struggle with, but it's a real thing. Transitioning, so like going from one task to another is like really difficult for me. So like finishing one thing, I could be like, I think some people mentioned it, like I just want to stop, you know, after that. I don't want to like, or like I want to just carry on doing that one thing because that's like the safe place now, you know, like this is the one task that I'm like I'm getting into the flow of, but like saying, okay, I got to do this now and changing tasks, or like that's like really, it's a lot of effort for me. Yeah, so they're the main things that kind of like were the identifiers of it. But yeah, I think that I'm sure there's like other things too that I could think of, but the other thing was like getting super distracted, like so distracted. Like I was like inviting distractions almost. Like I was kind of finding a distraction. I'll just pick up my phone and be like, oh, I'll just go through my emails and make sure like I clear my inbox now. You know, I didn't there wasn't, you know, those emails have been sitting there, but now I'm like, okay, I'm set up for work. Oh, I'll just do this now, you know. Or maybe Instagram has, you know, some messages or some new feed that I can look at, you know, which it always is gonna have. But yeah, I don't even like realize I do it. I'm just like, oh, okay, I'll do this now, or I'll do this now, you know. And the other thing I find that I do is like when I've done my morning of work, which like doesn't actually consist of a lot of work, I'll take lunch. So then I'll like, oh, I deserve a break now, so I'll take lunch and I'll watch like an episode of like a TV show, and I'll watch the full like 40 minutes of it, and I'll be like, okay, well, that was my lunch. And then I'll try to start work again. You know, like yeah, it's actually very, like, even saying this out loud, I still am feeling that like the embarrassment, because like, okay, I'm not like, I am like working as a full-time, you know, software developer, but I'm really struggling to do the work part of what I'm, you know, paid for. So yeah.
You weren't here for this like earlier part of the conversation where we talked about how like disability is kind of like not necessarily that you're the one who's the problem, but that like the world and our society is set up in a way that is like inhibiting you from feeling like a fully functioning person.
Yeah.
So I was just thinking like, is it so wrong to watch a full episode of something at lunch? Like, is it wrong to take a long lunch? Like,
right. I
you know,
can't watch part of an episode, right?
yeah. And, you know, really hoping that, and it's given me hope too, hearing from people that like, with the types of work that you're moving into or have moved into, that there's more and more flexibility for you to be able to work in ways that feel not like you're not feeling guilty for how you're able to manage your time and your energy, but you're able to say like, this is what I'm doing. I'll be able to get it done, and I'll be able to communicate with my manager about it, rather than it being like the continuous cycle of shame and guilt for not hitting exactly the marks of time that have been kind of arbitrarily by the working day.
Right.
Yeah.
No, exactly that. Yeah.
I think maybe one last question. I also did want to call out two comments in the chat. Someone shared Habitica, which is a great way to kind of work on incremental changes and like kind of gamify your habits. So kind of similar to what Ted was talking about with like changing 1% a day. I've seen some great work with Habitica, and it's like a really fun interface that's kind of like an RPG. It is an RPG version of adulting. So that's Habitica. Loved the mention that you had of executive function coach. Someone mentioned that like medication has been really helpful. And I'm just kind of reading this in case people are watching this in the future. They won't have access to the chat. But medication has helped me to notice the cycles that I go through and how I like to respond when I'm feeling stressed or feel overwhelmed. So this last question, the kind of exit question that I'd love for everyone to just respond to. Are there any study tools or methods you could recommend that helped you retain knowledge and navigate LaunchCode 101 or whatever coding class you took better?
Sorry, what was the question to? I heard
Oh, that's sorry, to anyone.
Okay.
Ted, Jason, and you. No.
So as far as what I did when it came to the code, one thing that I would always do, say for example, if I were in REPL or even in VSC or even IntelliJ, if I wrote code that was bad or that just did not work, instead of deleting the code, I would just comment it out. So I would be able to reference back to that code to find out what I did wrong so I don't repeat the same mistake. So a lot of times just doing that would be very helpful in letting you learn, because it's like putting your hand in a beehive and expecting not to be stung, for the third or fourth time, the first time you're gonna know, hey, that hurt. So you're not gonna put your hand in there anymore, right? So it's kind of a learning situation. So I would just say this, learn from your mistakes, but also document your mistakes so you don't forget it. That's the one thing we could say about history class in the United States, right? History class is designed to teach you the errors that, the forefathers made in the past. And so you don't repeat the same mistake over again, right? Well, that's what you have to do. You use your code and just comment it out so you can say, hey, this didn't work. Make those comments inside of your code. And that's the best advice I can give to you.
It's really tough because the whole idea is that like programming is hard to learn. Doesn't matter who you are. I mean, the smartest people I've ever known had trouble learning to program. So it's going to hurt your brain. So you just, a lot of it is about expectation management. You just need to understand that it's expected that this will be stressful. Don't try to trick yourself into thinking it's going to be easy. And expect to make mistakes. People think that they're supposed to like program stuff and it's supposed to work. It's not how programming works at all. I asked a couple, like all my coworkers, actually, they were all in the room, and I was like, have you all ever just banged out like 100 lines of code and had no mistakes, like ever in your life, even one time? And they're just like, that has never happened. That will never happen. It doesn't work that way. Programming is about, it's Sideshow Bob stepping on rakes. You have to step on every single rake, get hit in the face, make every possible mistake that you can make. And then at the end of making all the mistakes, all the rakes are gone, you have working code. That's how you do it. So expect it to crash every single time you write a new line of code. And just understand that that's totally okay. People get frustrated about that. And what I've noticed with students more than anything else is that it's not like the absolute smartest students who get through. It's the ones who are most capable of managing frustration, keeping their expectations realistic. Just when it comes to when you don't have the energy for really strong, difficult executive stuff, just do the reading and let the easier stuff seep in. But yeah, something like a Pomodoro is a decent idea, because the Pomodoro is just kind of an extension of like doing about this, not quite the simplest thing you can do, but taking a small manageable slice of work and saying, I'm just going to do this, rather than trying to go all or nothing. And, I'm going to get this whole assignment done. So it's really about thinking more in terms of how much effort you're putting in, rather than in terms of an objective goal and reaching it, because that's the whole trick with programming, is you never know how long it's going to take to reach the goal. You don't know how many rakes you're going to have to step on until you get through with this. And so it can be almost impossible to convince yourself to start, because no matter how simple something is, when you're new at programming, you never know if it's going to take 5 minutes or 16 hours. You don't know how stressful it's going to be. So it's sort of like jumping off a cliff. You don't know if it's one step or 10,000 feet into the ocean. So you kind of need to think more in terms of how much work am I going to put in versus how am the goal that you're going to reach. There's something like a Pomodoro, or just lower expectations and say, I'm going to code for 20 or 30 minutes. I'm going to make some mistakes. Exactly like Jason said, document those mistakes. So this, I stepped on this rake. I stepped on this rake. I stepped on this rake. And then the next time you come back, you can start coding again, and you'll find that that's really, really helpful. A lot of people, will say that like, I couldn't figure out this bug, and I stepped away, and, like I was saying earlier, yeah. A missed opportunity there. But yeah, basically, you have that background stuff in your brain going on, where like, because you were working on this, you have a sort of Zeigarnik effect going on, where suddenly you'll just sort of figure the bug out, or you'll come back to it with a blank slate. The problem with programming is you get so far into the woods that you can't like back up and see that there's another entrance to the forest over here, or a nice little grove over here where everything's clear and easy to understand. And sometimes the only way to get out of those woods is to just take a break, go away, do something else for a while, and then you come back, your eyes are fresh, and you can start with a totally different angle, and you'll just kind of walk right through something that was a huge problem. Just do not be all or nothing about it. Study, defrag the perfect. Yeah. Study, the easy stuff when you don't have the ability to study the hard stuff. And also understand that no amount of reading can supplement actual coding. As much as some of us like to believe otherwise, coding is very much, it's an executive activity. It's not a purely conceptual thing. It's just like math, where you have to work out the problems, or you will not learn. So I guess that's it.
I only have one thing to add to that. Is I had an accountability buddy. I chose, well, actually, it wasn't even my idea. I didn't even know that it was a thing. But one other student in my studio group realized I was getting behind. And I think by the off chance, I think she was struggling with the maths part of like coding. So she just kind of needed some help with that. And I didn't know coding yet, but I know maths well. So I was just like, I don't know if I can help, but we went in the breakout room, and and we just made like one connection, and we were like, hey, do you want to, like check in about like, if you get behind, that's fine, and then we just kept holding each other accountable of like, hey, where are you at right now? And like just being honest about like, hey, I'm like, 5 chapters behind right now. Obviously try not to get that like far behind, but if you are, then you just kind of like throw it out there and be like, hey, I'm going to try working like, 3 chapters this week just to catch up. But yeah, accountability buddies, it worked for me. I don't know if it worked for everyone. Honesty is like, and like kind of, yeah, on being honest with your accountability and just kind of making sure that accountability buddy like stays in the course as well. But you can always use your TAs actually. Like I'm happy to be an accountability buddy if anyone needs, a person to kind of check in on, because that definitely helps. And just kind of remove that like embarrassment and like, if you're behind, you're behind. Just like, come up with a plan. I like the Pomodoro. Sorry, I said one thing and then I've gone into 5 things. I like the Pomodoro timer too. I did try it for a bit, but I struggled with prioritizing. So I had like the list of things to do, and then I can pick one to start with. I started like just kind of at random, like, okay, I'm doing this one now, and then like that kind of worked, but that was hard. Is that focus? I was gonna mention that. Is focus make the one where you like Zoom with someone else? I think you posted it before. Yeah, I thought about trying that. I looked into that and haven't got around to it yet, but it sounds like a good idea. Kind of like one of those kind of awkward good ideas. But yeah, I think yeah, if anyone has tried it and would like to share kind of how that went. Well, that's cool.
Yeah, I still need to
I
try
also
it.
said one thing, and I wanted to say 5 things. Sorry, Selena. That accountability is great because it works for everything. I mean, like even difficult things like sobriety, and no matter what, it's one of the best tools there is for anything. But what I forgot to mention that I wanted to mention is like you were saying about like setting up a standing desk and all that stuff. One thing that's been super helpful for everything is making my work environment as comfortable and inviting as possible, and that's something that you'll see in a lot of like research. So like if something is stressful, I'll set up like candles. I mean, I got into candles when I was like 39. That's a little weird age, but sure, it works. Music, stuff like that. I love goldfish crackers. Candy if need be, just whatever it takes to kind of to say this is a fun, comfortable environment to be in, and that is really, really helpful for, again, tricking me. It's all about just tricking myself, my monkey brain, into sitting down and starting working. That's it. Sorry to interrupt, Sarah.
No, I definitely keep cats for that very purpose. No. All right, it is 7:06. Wow, every time I talk with this group of individuals, it's a different group every time, but I just have so much appreciation for all of you and gratitude for your generosity with your time. And I know that you work tirelessly outside of this space to just like help people understand coding. And if you're a learner, you've done something very instrumental in like being that accountability buddy for others and being there for them. So I just want everyone to unmute and give yourself and others a round of applause. I'm unbearably cheesy in this way. Yay.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Yay. Thank you all.
Guys. No problem, guys.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll follow up with a recording, and I will also include just kind of notes with things that I've gotten from the chat. I won't include any names or identifiers, just the resources. But thank you. And yeah, I'm open to like brainstorming like ways for people to stay in touch, because I think that this would be such a cool community for people to have access to moving forward. So thank you.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Set it up.